All right, we cool? No, we are frozen. Yes, yes, indeed, in time. Shoot. All right. Sorry, I just need to make sure that I'm actually recorded. My face is so important, you guys. There we go. Hey, so I will take, by the way, I'm just going to just kind of get your attention with a fun thing I made. This is a recursive curve I started. The idea is that you start with a line. You break that into two lines. And then you keep on using this breaking a line into two lines, iterating over and over again. So this is the power of recursive functions, by the way. This is one of the things that you can use recursive functions to do, is to make trippy programmatic art. But that's not what we're talking about today. So we are going to talk about kind of crafting components. What we talked about in the lecture, for those of you who are sober for it, was the, it's kind of starting to introduce React and frameworks. And at the tail end of it, I talked about, we had spent some time with JSX, and we had composed JSX expressions, which are components that React DOM kind of serves to us. But at the end of it, I should have put coffee in that cup. It's too late now. By the end of it, I was talking about hey, let's take a UI UX and let's decompose it. Let's break it into the components it should be. All right. So I want to now get into the composing. How to compose components. How to create components that are composed of other components. Components, compose components. Yeah, I'm going to be saying that a lot. Just kind of a lot. Just a lot. All right, so the idea behind React is that everything that we create, every visual element, and maybe even state management element, it's going to be a component. So if I take one of my examples from the lecture, the dribble design. So we kind of, no, that's not the one. Let me go back to me, go to my dashboard. Nope. Come on, view. Yeah, JS logic. So we made here a thing that's about a shoe, right? So it would make sense for us to say that we could turn this into a component, something that we could reuse over and over again with different shoes. So they wouldn't have to be constructing a JSX expression every time. You could ostensibly use React very effectively without creating a component of your own. But I say this quite sincerely, don't. This is a way for us to kind of break these things apart. So I want to be able to make a shoe component. Now right now I have this built out expression. What I really want to do is say class shoe display extends react dot component. Now let's say for a moment that we're going to, oh, come on, buddy. Calm down. Shh, shh. You're fine. Okay. Let's say that my expression here was was an instance. This is an instance of the shoe display component, right? That's what's in my expression. That's what my entire expression is. Now, you'll notice it's not quite happy with me. And why isn't it happy with me? This .instance.render is not a function. The one thing we need, the only thing that we need to create a component that we absolutely do need is a render function. So let's make a render function. And what I want to do is basically want to take everything here and just say return. So this has to return JSX. It would probably be a good idea if your render function didn't actually do anything, by the way. It'd be a good idea if your render function didn't, trigger side effects or cause anything else to happen, if there was no imperative code. It'd be a really good idea if your render code was just, look, I have this. This is it. Right? I have, given my state, given my props, given these things, here's what I have to offer you. Right? This is very declarative. So all of your code when you create a component is going to be basically two types of things. So breakout. All of your code when you make components will be two types of things for the most part. They are either going to be declarative JSX expressions or imperative state management. So when I say JSX expressions, I mean that when I was doing a job search last, I guess kind of second to last, before landing here at Lighthouse, one of the big lessons I had about tech interviews is that if you listen closely in tech interviews, you'll hear people say smart things that you can then use in each successive tech interview as if they were your own. So in this case, the smart thing that I heard in one of my first tech interviews was, oh, we really like React because React, your presentation is a function of your data. And I mean that function of your data in the sort of mathematical sense, that given certain data, I will have certain presentation. And my presentation is just a really kind of flat, plain reflection of my data. My data casts a certain shadow that you can see, right? And that the idea is that in any component, given the same data, I should have the same output, right? So what I see is a reflection of the state behind it. It's kind of like some of your facial expressions. I look on your facial expressions and I can see confusion. Like there's a confused state. A confused flag is true. A confusion level is over 9,000. Like I know that that's happening behind your head because your face is an expression of kind of what's going on behind, right? Right? That kind of makes sense? See? A lot less confusion on your faces. I can see your faces. You can't see. It's the thing. All right. So your presentation is a function of your data. Whatever your data is will be reflected in your presentation. So basically there's a way of we define something that's like, given this data, I want this output. And that's what the render function is. But then there's imperative state management. It's going to be things like in the constructor, setting an initial state in a constructor. And we're going to be updating that as well with updating state. Right. Declaring an object that's going to describe how your state's going to change. Okay. So this is important. So let's take a look at this shoe. Now, right now, this shoe display is bringing in stuff that's kind of from outside of this thing, right? And what do we have here? We have an image. Yeah, but we also have the certified classic flag, and we have a bunch of tags. So these themselves that can become stuff. But right now, this shoe display, it's getting its information from, well, it's getting all this stuff from outside, which all this should be in the render function, probably. So I'm going to grab that classic flag, right? Const tags, const classic flag. This is now coming out of, I should really fork this. Yeah, that's better. Yes. Right? We're taking this stuff from outside here, and we're kind of using it here. Save. JSX component. So we have all this stuff now, but we have the shoe that's still in the global thing. Now, what if I have more than one shoe and want to see a different thing for each shoe? What do I do? Well, so let's make a new shoe. This is the AF1. You know this is gone now. Because, okay, well I guess this we're going to call AF1. 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 Right? This is still based on a global thing. How do I say I want this thing to render this specific shoe? How can I tell it which shoe I want it to render? Well, not quite set state yet, but we're getting close. Yeah, we can pass it as a prop. Now, I could say that this is the Air Force One display and pass it in. Or I could just say, like, you know what? Shoe display, and the shoe in question is the AF1. So now if we look at this in, I'm going to bust this out. I think I should have the React developer tools, change view, full page, nope. Debug mode. Yeah, there it is. I have the React thing here. I can see that this shoe display has a shoe prop. So props are one source of data for a set of shoes, or sorry, for components. Also, shoes can have props, I'm sure. One could have mad props for someone else's shoes. It's an important part of a component is that we can pass data to it. We can decide, you know what, I want to render this, but I want to have data. Like, I want to have this thing based on some data. When you guys have your to-do list items, you have one item for each to-do, and I want to be like, hey, your job for each instance is to show this one particular to-do, right? So I'm going to pass here. I got this one. But it's not really using it yet, and I want it to be able to use it. So I'm going to say here, const shoe equals this dot props dot shoe. And now we're back to the same situation where we have like, okay, there's this one shoe that has this one thing, but it's now based on, if we look at it in debug mode again, let's take out that second certified classic. We can see here that this, let me go to my React tab. Yeah, this hasn't changed much, but it's still based on this like one particular shoe. So let's make another shoe object. Okay. What's another shoe of some magnificence? Converse. Converse 1 star. Yeah, the 1 star is the. So let's go Wikipedia. Converse 1 star. I see that there's one for the Chuck Taylor All Stars. So that might just happen. Okay. So let's 1908. That is. Yeah, well, that's the thing, but 1921. 1921. Okay, so I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say const all-star equals brand. It's going to be Converse. Name all-star. Release year is going to be, is it 1912 we said? 1920. 1921. Sorry, momentarily backwards. All right, so describe these shoes. I need some tags. What are we thinking? Black? Yeah, they are black. Let's, yeah. Let's do, tags is going to be, high top, vintage. What else? What else we got? Huh? Pinky pain? Pinky pain? Waterproof. All right. Because it's not waterproof is why that's hilarious. All right. All right. Apparently we have some feels about the All-Star, and they are not all positive. Okay. All right, and then we need an image. Images, Google CA, Chuck Taylor, All Stars. Right? Me. Okay. Img URL. Okay. So now we have the ability to put these side by side if we wanted to, right? Expression, we could even like just make it one of those things. Shoe display. Shoe is it All-Star? Yeah. That's a good question. I might be just taking a moment. Hopefully it's not just freaking out that it doesn't have the image yet. Let's... I might just put a div around this just to see if that's a worry. Okay, yeah. So here's that. High top, vintage, pinky pain, nodder proof, smash mouth. As in, hey, now you're an all-star. Is... Okay, here's the thing, is that I was a movie theater usher in 1997, and that was at the end of, like, every movie. I'm pretty sure it was in the credits to Saving Private Ryan that year, so... Not the point. Right, so now we have these things. And because we have now kind of separated out the data for the shoe display from the actual like presentation. All the shoe display does is, well, it displays shoes. It doesn't even display shoes. It displays a shoe. Look at this guy. Look at this. Look at this fella. So, how do I keep track of how many shoes? Now we get to the point of like, well, maybe I want to be able to, you know, keep track of this. Maybe I want to change which shoes are available. Because right now it's just like, I have some static data and it's just like, rah, there, right? I might want to be able to change this a bit. Maybe I want to get this from an API, right? So there might be some different steps of what I might want to do. And for that, I may want to actually have some way of keeping track of the state of these shoes. So this is where state might come in handy. This is me kind of being able to change things. So let me start with, I'm going to make another class. I'm going to make it below shoe display here. And I'm going to call it class shoe collection extends react dot component. All right. And I'm going to say, you know, I need a render function, right? Always need a render function. I'm going to say const shoes equals AF1 all-star. Then I'm here. What does my render function need to do? What's the one thing it actually needs to do? Return something. What does it need to return? Yeah, JSX, something it can render. Now I have had components I've created where all the render does is return false, but that's another story entirely. For the most part, the short story is the job of the render is to return some JSX. Right? So I'm going to return div. And then here I'm going to want a shoe display for each shoe in my collection. How do I do that? I have an array of shoes, and I want an array of shoe display expressions. Maps. All right. Could we write vanilla? Yeah, we could write vanilla JavaScript if we wanted to. It would just, you know, take longer and be harder to read. I'm not. Stop putting ideas in my head. So, for each shoe, I'm just going to return shoe display shoe. Right? So now my expression can be equals shoe collection. Right? And this, let's take a look at this. Nope, I didn't want that. Yeah. Let's reload this. Okay, so now we have a shoe display, one of which has my Air Force One, and we have another one of which has my Converse, right, my All-Star. All right. Now, I want to be able to get this from my API, which means that when I first bring this up, do I have the data? No, we got to wait for it to come over. So this is going to be where I'm going to employ state. What I want to say is, initially I want to have a state of, hey, I'm loading something. And maybe I'm going to have a loading spinner. Something that says like, hey, we got some shoes coming. You hear those footsteps? Them shoes. I know. I say silly things for money. And then I want to be able to load these up in a bit. But first I want to be able to like, hey, how do I know I have them? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, well, I'm going to start by setting that these shoes are part of the state of this thing. So how do I set up the state? Well, what I need to have is an initial state. All right. And where should my initial state go? Where do I put that? In the constructor. So I'm going to make a constructor. I'm going to say constructor props, super props. I have to do that because of reasons. And I'll get to those reasons in a second. And I'm going to set what my initial state is. And this dot state equals shoes is AF1 All-Stars. And here I'm going to say const shoes is this dot state dot shoes. Let's save that. Okay, so now we're going to reload this page. And we're going to see something interesting. We have the shoe collection. It has a state of 2 shoes. The Nike, the Air Force One, the Converse All-Star, right? And the things that you see are a reflection of this. For each of my shoes, I should have a shoe display. Okay, and the shoe display is, hey, given a shoe, I should display it in a certain way. Here's a certified classic, funky fresh, sneakerhead, retro Velcro. Grow. Look. All right. Okay, so, but this is where things go, what? Rosie, keep it together. All right. So, this is where I need to start manipulating my state. So now, everything up to now has been kind of, well, this notwithstanding, everything has been kind of a declarative code, right? I'm just given some data, I'm returning something, and then it just sort of like pops up. The only really imperative thing is basically saying, hey, react dom.render, and then react dom does it's moving and it's shaking, right? So I'm going to start with a couple things. I'm going to create, so instead of this having the shoes to start with, I'm going to say this dot state equals shoes loading true. And down here, I'm going to say, oh, and then maybe I'm going to say shoes doesn't mean empty array, just because. I'm going to say if this dot state dot shoes loading, I'm going to return div loading a dot dot dot. Otherwise, I'm going to render the shoes. Let's take a look at this. This is our loading spinner. This is how we tell the people, like, hey, chill out. Got some stuff coming. Right? Don't have much stuff, but it's going to be some stuff before too long. So now I have to have something actually do this. Now, what I really want to do is I want to start changing the state after this thing has added. So I'm going to create an AJAX call that's going to start once this is actually in place. Okay? And how do I know? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do hooks yet? No. Okay. I'm going to do a thing you don't want to. I'm going to show you a slightly bad practice, and then I'm going to fix it later. Because I don't want to introduce more things just to get to the point I'm trying to make. But what I am going to do here is I'm going to make a function that's going to create a promise and resolve it in like 3 seconds? Not 3 milliseconds, 3 like seconds. All right, function get shoes from API. And what this is going to do is return new promise, resolve, set timeout, so what this does is it creates a new promise whose job is just to wait 3 milliseconds and then resolve with the shoes. This is how I, like basically if I have an API call to make and I just don't have that API yet, this is how I fake that. Pretty simple. So what I want to say here is that I want to, hey, get shoes from API. And this is my shoes promise. Right? And I want to say shoes promise dot then, which is going to resolve with some shoes. This dot set state. Now what should my state be once I get my shoes? Shoes loading is false. And my shoes is my shoes. So this is another imperative. This is how I am updating my API, or updating my state. So let's 1 banana, 2 banana, 3 banana. You saw how it basically it waited for a little bit, and then I have this. The shoes loading is false, right? I have my shoes. I have my data. So what state is an instantaneous snapshot of data that a component can kind of manipulate on its own. A child cannot manipulate a parent component state. A parent cannot manipulate a child component state. The component is responsible for maintaining and changing its own state. Right? So all the code for that is going to be just right here. Good? Yeah? Okay. Now, let's say I want to be able to delete one of these. How can I do that? There is going to have to first be a DOM event that I listen to. Something has to happen on the HTML that I can respond to with my state management. And then I'm going to do some state management, and then I'm going to, I don't know, something else, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this shoe collection is doing all my state management, right? Okay, cool. So I'm going to make a function here, and the point of this function is to perform some state management. And I'm going to delete shoe. I guess I want to do it by ID. No, do I have ID? Shoe name? Yes, do shoe name. Okay. I guess we can add an ID here. Sure. right? And what I'm going to say, from here, I should be able to write a method that would delete a shoe. Am I mistaken? Right? I should be able to write something like that. Something like, well, what would this look like? I would get the current shoes. How do I get the current shoes? This dot state dot shoes. I would say const shoes without the accursed shoe equals the current shoes dot filter shoe dot ID is not. So this is get all the shoes except for this one, right? All the shoes that aren't this particular one. Cool, cool, cool. And then I'm going to say, well, this dot set state shoes is shoes out without the accursed shoe. Right? Let me see if this works. I'm going to do a set timeout here. Set timeout of, I guess another, let's do it 5,000 milliseconds. It's a bit of time. But I'm going to say this dot delete shoe shoes at 0 dot ID. So it should remove the first one, right? Ostensibly? Maybe? That sounds about right. So let's load this up and see what happens. So we start, we don't have any shoes. We have shoes. Banana, 2 banana, 3 banana, 4 banana, 5 banana. We have only one shoe. So we have updated our state to remove a shoe. Right? And we can see that we only have one shoe display, and of course we only have one shoe display displayed. Why? Because we only have one shoe. I was walking to the train this morning, and there was one shoe in the parking lot. And I did think that was strange. Unrelated to this entirely. Just there's like one shoe. And I was just like, how do you lose one shoe? Are you like running for the SkyTrain so fast your shoe comes off and you're like, that's okay, I need to hop, like this is the time? There's a story behind that shoe and I want to know what it is.
Well, it was a weekend, so someone stumbled at home.
It was a weekend. I didn't take that into consideration.
They lost their shoe and they didn't realize until they got home and their sock was really wet. I bet that's what happened.
I'm just counting your shoes real quick. Yeah, you're fine. Okay.
I'm good. I slept last night.
I yeah, so I mean, probably they just like knocked a shoe out of their car and didn't realize, but still, there's a story, right? So cool, I can do this dot delete shoe, shoes dot ID, right? Okay, so, yo. Yeah, we need the ID because we're deleting by ID. Yeah. Okay, so then I am going to do a thing. I am going to have to add the ability to do this. So I now have the ability to change state, but I need to actually hook that up to something, right? Who's got to Batman yet? Who's seen Batman? Right, so enough people have seen Batman. No, I mean like, I wrote a thing about Batman in the curriculum, so you have that to look forward to. I did draw the pictures. I did draw the pictures, and when you look at that Batman and think that is not a well-drawn Batman, I want you to know that that is my 6th Batman. It took a while to get to a Batman that good. Huh? Yeah. So, so what the analogy is this? We've talked about having a unidirectional. What ends up happening is that the parent can send props down to children. It is one direction. The children cannot manipulate their parents' data in any way, shape, or form, right? They are able to receive data down. We're not able to necessarily just send data up in the same way, arbitrarily. What we can do is that the parent can send down a function. And this is what we're going to do here. We're going to send this function. So the deal with Batman is this. Batman has a one-directional relationship with the Gotham PD. He sends them criminals, right? Now, they want to be able to get a hold of him from time to time, as you can imagine. But what is Batman to do? Can he just give him his number? No, because they're going to be like, why do you have the same phone number as Bruce Wayne? We share a plan. No, that doesn't work. I'm Batman. Because then they're going to be like, oh, you're Batman. Yeah, you belong in Arkham, right? He can't do that. He can't give them something that they're going to do anything with. But what we can do, what he does, is gives them the bat signal. The thing that always cracked me up about the bat signal is that at some point he had to install it, right? Like, I'm just imagining him, like, lowering the bat wing kind of into place and moving the sort of, like, good. Does the bat wing have VTOL? Can it, like, just rise in? It would kind of have to, right? And just sort of getting it in place and then, like, just really quiet, right? Like, this is a thing I think about. Anyway, but the point is that when Batman, when Commissioner Gordon lights up the bat signal, what does Batman do? What does Batman have to do? He doesn't have to do anything. He's Batman, right? He could choose how he responds to that. If it was just about, like, they light it and he shows up, they could arrest him, right? So what he does is he's like, okay, look, I'm going to give you this bat signal, and then you call it, but, like, within certain limitations, right? I'm not just going to let you do anything. I'm not going to let you update my state. I'm going to set some guidelines on how you can do that. Now, we have created our bat signal. That's what delete shoe is. We are able to go through and delete a shoe with a certain ID. Fair enough? And so what I'm going to say here is on delete equals, and I'm going to pass, I have to pass a function. I will tell you how many times I've seen someone do this. Oh yeah, right, because it's a function. It takes in the shoe ID, right? That makes total sense. Not that it doesn't, but if I were to reload this, uncut, this on delete is not a function. It's not. Oh, not on delete. Sorry, you're right. It is delete shoe. My bad. Huh. Let me fix that one error, and I'm sure everything will work out fine. It won't. All right, let's do this. All of a sudden, this thing is not very happy. Where did it go? What happened? Well, basically, it called the state changed, and it called delete shoe. We didn't pass the function. We actually called the function delete shoe, and then that caused a change in the state, which triggered a render, which triggered a change in the state, which triggered a render, triggered change in the state. And in this case, actually, I think what happened, because it deletes the first one, it just deleted both of our things, and that's done. And now we don't have it anymore. This is why we can't have nice things. So what you have to do is really say, like, make sure it's a function. On delete is, it's going to call this. I don't need to pass anything else, just like, hey, just do this. And now that I have that, now that I have passed it a function that it is happy with, come on. Cancel, I think I have to save this. It's going to be fine with that. So now I have to go to this. I have passed on delete to the shoe display. So now I've been Batman. When I'm in this, I'm Batman, right? I have created the function that actually says, like, okay, send me the signal. That's what delete shoe is. I have installed it on top of the GPD. Like, did he just use a hand one that was, like, really quiet? I don't know. It drives me mad inside my head. And then...
Wouldn't you just build it at the Batcave and then use this plane or helicopter or something, just like
Yeah, but somebody had to install it. That's the thing that gets me.
I feel like that's how it would go.
Yeah.
It's like, call me when you need me. But I'm not
Or he could have just been like, just make me a spotlight. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. I'm confused about how the actual bat signal works. Yeah, like how it got there. Anyway.
yeah, but he
Right.
needs to physically put it on the
Yeah, he needs to actually put it on top of the GPD quietly so they don't be like, if they're like, what is that sound? They get up there and he's like, oh, hey, guys. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. They might have worked it out between them. Yeah. Anyway, so shoes and the accursed shoe. So I have made this function, and here is me actually kind of installing it. Here's me passing it to the child components. Now, the next step is that the child component needs to be able to call it somehow. So I'm just going to put, I guess on this image tag, because you can do an on-click on an image. Maybe I should make a delete button. I'll make a delete button. That makes a lot more sense. Oh. It's fine. It's fine, I guess. This dot props on delete. So now I have taken that function from my props and passed it here. So now if I take a look at it in the code pen, I will see that there is a delete button. What did I do? Oh yeah. So there's a delete button for both of these, right? If I take a look at it in the React tab, what I can see is that this has the state, shoes and shoe loading, and these shoe display have an on-delete function and a shoe object. And now when I click this, what should happen is the shoe collection state should update, right? We've done this before. We've updated the state. This should be just fine. Wait, it is. Oh, you're supposed to screw up. Come on. You're making me look bad. All right. Oh, right, because I already did the. Okay. Sorry, let me try it again. I'm going to pass this dot delete shoe like that. And in here, I'm going to say, oh, on click, this dot props dot on delete shoe dot ID. It's a little bit dangerous, but I'm sure it's fine. So the fact that I can pass any ID in there is like weird, but whatever. Okay, cool. Now, so I'm passing this function. Everything's fine. Except it's not. If I look at the console, I can see cannot read property shoes of undefined. Cannot read property shoes of undefined. Okay, well, let's take a look at delete shoe on delete. Cannot read property, this is the line in question, cannot read property shoes of undefined. Well, but I have a this.state, right? Let me console.log this.state and see what is indeed the what. Loading, 1 banana, 2 banana, 3 banana, there we go. And it's saying that it is indeed, this.state is undefined. Well, let me back up a second and say, well, what's this? What is the this that I'm, it should have a this.state, it should be the whole thing. Been using it to do things. Come on. What's my this dot, what's my this, I guess? Well, I see this has a on delete and a shoe, but no state. What is this? Well, in this case, this is pointing to the props that I sent to that one component, not to the parent component. It's forgotten what this is. For reasons that are like just JavaScript kind of being screwy, basically, as you may have experienced in some of your coding already, JavaScript isn't really firm about what this means. We can take any function, bind it to kind of anything else, and that becomes the this. Right? So it doesn't always know what this is. It's a little bit like, they don't have experience when they're a kid, like 4 or whatever. They'd be like in a mall, and they'd be like holding on to their mom's hand, and they like look at a shiny thing, and then they just kind of reach up and grab a hand, and it's not their mom, right? And you're instantly like, ah, right? And then you're like, you look for your mom, right? JavaScript's answer to this is basically, you're my mom now. I am a 70-year-old man. I cannot be your mom. You're my mom now. So it's basically, this function is no longer attached to the thing it's supposed to. It's just kind of attached to whatever, right? And it's just like, no, don't attach. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that when we create this function, it is going to be attached to this component. And we are going to bind it to this component. And what this means is that the definition of this for this function will never change. I'd kind of accidentally done it already because I don't pay attention. But what I'm going to do here in my constructor is I'm going to say this dot delete shoe equals this dot delete shoe dot bind this. And what this basically says is, hey, delete shoe, you know exactly who I am. And now that this is in place, when I press delete, it knows what this is. And here I see it. This is a shoe collection object, right? It has like props and context and state and updater. I'm not entirely certain what updater is, but there it is. Yeah? So if you have a problem of cannot read property blank of undefined in React, 95% of the time, it's this binding. Should I bump that up? Should that be 97? Yeah. High 90s for sure. For sure. All right? So this is a really common problem, and this is a really easy solution for it. Basically, what I do is if I have a method that I'm going to be passing off that changes my state, basically if I have a method that changes my state at all, I bind it first. I make sure that I bind every one of them in my constructor. It's hacky, it's ugly, JavaScript. Well, I just do them one after another. Oh, and also you can actually bind arguments as well, but that's dark magic. Stay away from it for a moment.
Like within that area, could you add more, or would you have?
Yeah, I could be like this dot add shoe equals this dot add shoe dot bind this, and you know, whatever other thing I wanted to do, and that way I know that it's connected. Oh, okay. The first thing I did was to make, I made a function. Yeah, it was an arrow function. Arrow functions preserve the this where they were created. They're a little smarter about that. It's a whole thing. Has to do with how JavaScript does inheritance, and also just, I can't. You just don't, I just can't, it's just, so, yeah, it's a whole thing. It's just a whole thing. There's an article I think I linked in the curriculum about that, about like this binding, and there's like 5 strategies for dealing with it. Yes. This. Yeah, this dot delete shoe equals this dot delete shoe dot bind this. So basically this says there's kind of a general delete shoe function. I want to make a specific delete shoe function for this particular. And I have to use this because I'm passing this function around and because I'm using this. That combination is just bad news. Okay. There's one more thing I want to talk about. This shoe display extends React.component. How many functions does it have? How many methods does it have as you look at it? One, it just has the render method, right? It doesn't have any state management. All this thing does is it just takes in some props and puts out some JSX, right? Like that's all she wrote. So what we can do is functions like this, or like components like this, we can actually just rewrite as functions. Pretty simply. Not that one, this one. So what I can do is I can say function shoe display, and what this is going to take in is props. And so it really is, right? A function that takes in props and puts out JSX. So I'm going to copy all of this from the render. There. I have this dot props, but, well, I don't really have any this to speak of, do I? Because I'm no longer creating an object with this stuff. So instead of becoming this dot props, it's just props. Shoe.tags, this is just props. And I'm going to go ahead and comment this one out. And now this is styles background blah blah. I'm gonna do const tag style equals there we go. Just a bit of code cleanup here. Style is tag style. And now this is just, I don't have to change the way I use this. I'm just declaring it as a function, but I can still use it as a component with no problem. So if I look back on here, did I save it? I want to make sure I saved that. It still acts the exact same way. I had to make no change to how it's being used. I just changed the way it was being declared. So there's a couple of really cool things about this. The first is that, well, my props, well, the first is this. Here's shoe display. Does this have any state? Does it have any this binding? Does it probably perform any DOM manipulation? Does it? Do we have any lifecycle methods? Do we have anything other than that it just brings in props and spits out JSX? No. You know what this thing does immediately. Now, what you don't know for certain from that first line is what props it has. So let me use destructuring. I'm going to say const shoe and where'd I go? On delete equals props, right? So now I don't even have to use on delete anymore, right? And well, because of does this syntax make sense to everybody? So what this is short for const shoe equals props dot shoe const on delete equals props dot on delete. This is a destructuring. So instead of me making a props object from shoe or on delete, I am unrolling props into these two variables that I can now use freely. Right? So that is the same as me doing this. And then also, my next step here is I can say, I can take this, I can put it right there. And so what this is saying is, my shoe display is taking in an object, and that object has a shoe and on delete key that are now available as variables. It's hard to say available as variables. They're now available as variables throughout the throughout here. I can use on delete. I can use all of these. And so, hey, the shoe display is a component, and it takes in some props. What kind of props? I'll tell you. I'm glad you asked. Shoe and on delete. I know some things immediately about just looking at this. I just know things. In a split second, I know exactly what this thing does, which is really handy. Because when you're fishing through component after component after component after component in the library, it's nice to know which ones just do very small things. Okay. And if I save this and I rerun it, it still behaves the exact same way. Cool, cool, cool. The last thing I want to talk about really briefly is lifecycle methods. I mentioned them a couple times. Don't have a lot of time to talk about them. But do you guys remember document.onReady from jQuery? What was the point of that? Right. Right, so our scripts would run after the page had loaded. We weren't trying to operate on DOM that wasn't there. Right? Now, we may want to have that sort of thing for our components. We might want to know when they have run. So we have what are called lifecycle hooks, or lifecycle methods. And the one you're going to use the most is component did mount. And what this means is that when the thing has been added, when the thing has been constructed, rendered, and has been added to the page, then this function will go. And generally speaking, this is where I put my initial AJAX get. So the mounting process has a few steps. There's a constructor. There's a render, so it creates some JSX that is added to the DOM, and the component did mount fires. The component did mount will run once in the life cycle of this particular component. For any component, component did mount will only ever be called once. If you don't write a component did mount method, it's not going to matter. No one cares. Now there are more life cycle methods. The next kind of most important one would be component will unmount. So the mounting is it going into the DOM. What do you think the unmounting is? It being removed from the DOM. So there is a component will unmount that's like, hey, by the way, I'm about to take this thing off of the DOM. And now we can, if we had something like, for instance, if I had a clock, I might set a timer to update the state of the clock, right? Well, if my clock gets removed, and my timer's still running. What is my timer updating? Nothing. So there's going to be an error when it tries to update something and it finds that there's nothing to update. It's going to get so mad, you guys. So component will update is a good time for me to be like, oh, I'm about to take off. It's a good place to clean some stuff up. Now, so there's mounting and there's unmounting. There's also when data changes, we're going to want to update. And there is a whole confusing, dizzying, ever-changing array of lifecycle methods that is just, they keep on being like, this will simplify it, and they add they make a whole different set every year or so, and it's like, that didn't help like even a little bit. There are reasons to use those, but they're kind of a pain. So for right now, knowing component didn't mount, awesome. Knowing component will unmount, super cool. Probably not going to use it, but awesome. And kind of in between those, there's just chaos. Okay. Are there any questions? Like under the range of like 1 million? I did a lot of stuff about components. And it's going to make more sense when you make your own. This whole week is going to make more sense with the practice. The first day is going to be confusing as hell, and that's okay. Yes. Right. Right. Well, in this particular example, if we go to React, we can see that at the top level there's the shoe collection. And the shoe collection has some state. It has an array of 1 shoe, which I'm going to make this. So now it has shoes loading true, and it has an array of 2 shoes. Right? That's the shoe collection. It's a parent and it's doing some stuff. Now, within that, there's a div, but there's 2 shoe displays. So the div is a child component, and technically the shoe displays are child components of the div. But they're being passed information from the shoe collection. Okay? And the information they're being passed for each of them is they're getting a function called onDelete and a shoe object. Right? Same thing for this one, only, of course, different shoe. So the parent is shoe collection, the shoe displays are there, and they're just sort of displaying information, and then they're sort of like pushing information. They're sending signals up. They don't even understand. It's like, you know those the experiments of the rat in a cage, and it'll push a lever, and it'll get a peanut, and after a while it figures out if it pushes the lever, it gets a peanut. This thing has no clue. Like, it keeps on pushing the lever, and there's a peanut, and it's like, huh. I don't know why that happens. It has no connection between, like, the state changes and the signals it sends. No idea. It just, like, I just pulled this bell. Oh, look, state changed, huh? Okay. It has no connection between the two of them. So all they do is they display and they send signals. Really, there is there's sometimes a distinction you'll see between smart and dumb components. Guess which one of these are? Dumb. They are dumb and they are pretty. Because their job is just to display. That's all they want to do. Like, hey, look, I'm providing an interface. I will display information. I will send information back. That's all. Right? And the shoe collection is the thing that's like masterminding, like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then my state's going to be this, and then I'm going to change the state to that, and I'm going to keep track of what's going on. Like, it's kind of keeping track of what's been changing. And that is, so the shoe collection is the parent, shoe display is the child. All right, any other questions? Does that answer your question? Awesome. Any other? Cool, well, I'm going to stop talking.